Hi. Are we live? Hello. Hi. Hi. Let's see. We haven't actually tested that this will work. It won't. Give me, hmm? Give me 1 second. Let's try that.
Next on the screen.
There we go. All right. Let's try this again. Hello. My name is Gwen, and the title of this talk is Don't Plan, The Secret to Game Dev Survival. I like this title. I think it's kind of cool. I can't take credit for it. I didn't come up with it. I didn't even know what this talk was going to be when I agreed to that title. I hadn't even begun writing the talk yet when I agreed to that title, but I figured I'd just make a bold statement and then like craft content later to make it true. I think that's industry standard at this point. I'm comfortable with that. I'm a game developer. I'm here this year. I'm demoing an indie game at Left Field as part of EGX. Oh, shit. The slides are not advancing. Sorry. How about this? I think I need to click that, and then we'll start. No. This is what I want. All right, let's try that again. Bam. Okay. I found out just a couple weeks ago that I'd be here at EGX showcasing Kind, and I was really excited about that because I really, really want to talk about what I'm working on. So I reached out to a lot of different people. I was trying to see if anybody would interview me about my game and stuff, and I thought maybe I could get to be a part of a panel up here at EGX, and it turns out I did. I ended up in an email chain with the nice people that run this event. That was about 2 weeks ago. And I thought when I was in this email chain that I would get to be part of a panel. And they were like, what's the title of your talk going to be when you write your PowerPoint? And I was like, shit, I have to write a PowerPoint in 2 weeks. That's a bit tight. I knew I'd have to crunch to get it done, but I'm a game developer. Crunching for a game show is pretty much industry standard at this point. So I agreed to it. I pitched 3 possible topics. Because, I mean, I've got a lot I could talk about, right? I've been in the industry for about a decade now. I figured I could talk about BioShock Infinite. That's one of my favorite things. I loved working on that game. I did all the background scenes, like all the characters you see in the background. I did the cloth, the physics, the dynamics, that sort of thing. That was really fun. I could talk about that. Or we could go in a different direction. I could talk about the transition from AAA to indie. 5 years ago, I co-founded a studio with 6 other people. 6 of us got together and we made an indie game in 2 years. It's called The Flame and the Flood. It's been played by millions around the world. I'm incredibly proud of this. I could easily talk about this. Or we could go in a different direction. I could talk about some of the darker stories, right? Like the time Gazillion closed Slipgate Ironworks, what it was like to be laid off from that project. I could talk about what it feels like to make the game of the year, BioShock Infinite, and then have your studio close. I mean, like I could talk about that if you want. Yes, that would be what they wanted, mostly. They were quite interested in that last topic. I think it seemed pretty exciting. So that's okay. All right, fine. Cool. So I figure I'll come here today. I'll stand on stage and I'll tell you a bunch of stories about how Slipgate Ironworks closed and how Gazillion shut down. But first, at this point in the email chain, I had not written a single word of this talk yet. We just had a premise, and I had to come up with a title. Because we have physical media here, right? They have to print pamphlets. I'm familiar with this. You can't patch a pamphlet. So we had to commit to something early on and stick with it. I pitched 3 possible titles. All 3 of my titles were rejected. We went with a different title, a juicier title that would market better in the marketplace. I think at this point I realized this talk wasn't about game development. I think at this point I realized this talk is game development. So welcome to this talk. I like this title. I didn't come up with it, but I think it's absolutely true. I really do love it. I think there is one secret you need to know to survive in this industry, and I want to tell you what it is. But first, I did promise EGX that I would tell you a bunch of stories about these studios that closed. So let's start with Gazillion. I think most people know Gazillion as a publisher. They made Marvel Heroes Online. But there was a time before that. There was a time when Gazillion had a completely different management staff. They had a different executive board. And back then, they had a couple studios, but they were operating Slipgate Ironworks. Right out of college, I got an interview at Slipgate, and I was really, really grateful for that. This company, man, they were working on the most cutting edge stuff. They were so exciting. This company, they were working on stuff so secret, they wouldn't even tell me what it was. Like, I wasn't allowed to know what job I was interviewing for, what the game was, until I went to the on-site interview. That's how secret it was. And I was young, and that was cool. So I took that free flight to California, and I went to that interview. And I was like, all right, I'm here. You know, you say you're working on cutting edge stuff. What are you making? What are you working on? And they're like, oh, guess what? We got millions of dollars from investments. And they started showing me how much money they had, and I was like, all right, that's cool. So you're a company in Silicon Valley with a lot of money. That's cool, but what makes you so sure that this is going to work out? What makes you so sure you're making a hit? And they're like, oh, let me tell you. We hired a rock star designer, somebody you know, someone you've heard of, someone incredible. I'm like, who, what, who? They're like, John Romero. Shit. I was really young. I didn't follow the industry much back then. That was so exciting. I knew John Romero was the guy that made Doom, right? Like, he made that game where you shoot these fucking demons that come out of hellspawn portals and stuff. I was way into this. I loved that game. And now here he was, and he was creative lead of this studio, and they had millions of dollars. I was so excited. I had to know more. All right, I want to work for John Romero at a studio that's super well funded. What are we making? And they're like, it's an MMO. Shit. I love MMOs. Those were huge back then. This was 10 years ago. Keep in mind, back then, MMOs were new. They were exciting. They were the future. These days, we know MMOs are expensive, right? They're really difficult to make. These days, we know blockchain technology is the future. But back then, we didn't know about blockchain technology. Back then, the future was only MMOs. We were so excited about it. And venture capital was raining down on every MMO in Silicon Valley, specifically because of one. You have to keep in mind, World of Warcraft is 5 years old. There was no way that game was going to continue on. That game was looking dated back then. This was 10 years ago. We were sure World of Warcraft was going to end, and Blizzard was making so much money off of this game, and it was inevitable. Somebody was going to make the next WoW. Somebody was going to make the WoW killer. And so in Silicon Valley, money was raining down on MMO companies in order to do this. And here was Gazillion. They had millions of dollars. They had John Romero at the helm. They were going to make the WoW killer, right? I was so excited. I was like, all right, so what kind of MMO is this going to be? Is it going to be like an MMO with like hellspawn zombies and shit that you shoot and stuff? And they're like, no, man, we're doing something way better. We're making an educational kids MMO. What? A kids MMO? Oh, the video won't play. Damn. We're going to have to go without it. Yeah, that's true, though. Gazillion hired John Romero. This is the designer that made Doom, to make an educational MMO for children. It was, the target demographic was 6 to 10. It was going to teach kids math. And I have to admit, that was the big reveal, and they were really proud of this. And I was sitting in this meeting, and I was like, oh, okay. But they convinced me that this was brilliant, because keep in mind, this was 10 years ago. MMOs were the future. Games as a service was new, and it was exciting, and the entire industry was convinced that if you had some kind of ongoing revenue stream, you were set. You were a smart business decision. This was considered brilliant. And it wasn't just industry dogma. We had metrics and data. The CEO had a pitch deck, and it was phenomenal. He had graphs about the growth rates of the MMO market. He had charts showing that not only was the MMO market growing exponentially, but kids' games were doing super well. He had competitive analysis on Club Penguin and Second Life. He had a 5-year plan for explosively growing the company, and this sounded great, and I was young, and I was excited, and I was super into this. So, of course, I moved across the country, and I knew this was going to launch my career, and then the studio closed. I moved across the country. I was there for 6 months before the game was canceled. The studio was closed, and all of us lost our jobs. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, well, you were young and stupid, and you should never have gone there. They had a terrible business plan. Maybe. Okay, fine. Maybe you're right. Maybe the plan was bad. But we'll never know, because the game was not canceled because of the business plan. None of that was at all in doubt, right? Gazillion had no doubts about making a kids MMO. Wizard 101 had just launched. It was doing extremely well. Gazillion strongly believed in the plan. Now, I was junior. This was my first job, so I don't know for sure. why Gazillion shut down Slipgate Ironworks, but I definitely know the rumors. And I definitely was there at that time. And I can say I'm pretty confident the game was canceled because of technology. By the time I got to Gazillion, this game was several years into development, and I would regularly go into work and find out that the editor couldn't open, or certain maps couldn't open, or something would go wrong. Everyone knew our tools were unstable, they were slow and sluggish. And there was a lot of reasons for this. I think years before I joined this company, back when Slipgate was being founded, Python was new and hot and sexy, and Python was the future. And some people believed that game development would inevitably be done in Python. It would all be done in that. And there was this engine called Big World. This was a hot new engine in development at the time, and it was written entirely in Python from the ground up. So Slipgate decided they would develop an MMO at the same time as Big World was developing their MMO engine, and we would be using their technology. Well, that decision was made years ago, and over time, the tech leadership changed. Each time it changed, they'd build different kind of custom in-house tech around this engine. By the time I got there, we couldn't even integrate any changes to the Big World engine from Big World. We just had too many dependencies, and we had this kind of Frankenstein technology that was a bunch of different pieces of code bolted together to make this thing work. Which is why, I mean, we all knew this. In the studio, we all knew that the tech wasn't very solid. And right when I was hired, we actually hired somebody else, a new director of technology, Tommy Krull. And Gazillion told Tommy, they said, hey, come here, shape up the tech team, make this stuff work. And Tommy's brilliant. He's a fantastic programmer. He looked at the team, and then he looked at the code. And he got together with the leads, and he told management, look, basically they had to come to Jesus moment, all of the leads with management of Gazillion, and they said, look, your time estimates are kind of off. You have a lot of tech debt here that you need to fix. We're totally willing to fix it. Here's what it'll take. And they outlined the resources they would need to actually ship the game. They had that meeting, and within a week, our studio was closed. So, and the thing I'm worried about right now, telling this story, is I'm worried you're going to try to scapegoat Tommy, and I hope you don't, because the truth is, he inherited a pile of shit. The truth is, he was a true champion. The closing of Slipgate Ironworks, that was the end of Slipgate's story, and that was only the beginning of his. Tommy worked his butt off. He developed a real plan to ship the game Slipgate wanted to make. And his reward was the studio closed and he lost his job. But after that, Tommy got together with the second most senior programmer, Stefan Sherman, and they founded a tech company just to make a video game engine. At the time, mobile gaming was new, it was hot, so they made an engine for the mobile game market. And I have to admit, I thought this was crazy. We all did, right? Even back then, Unity was dominating the mobile market. There was no way for these two to get funding. Nobody believed that any company could compete with Unity. So Tommy and Stefan kind of went without funding for a while. They tried their best. They picked up contracts. They did one contract working for Riot. I think that might have been their only contract. They just kind of did that a lot. But I'm not entirely sure. I know 5 years passed, though, and they slowly worked at their engine, and they kept working on it, and they kept believing in it, even after I was sure they'd give up and quit. 5 years in, they launched Vainglory. This was the first MOBA for the mobile phone. It was the market leader in mobile phone MOBAs for years. And I know that seems weird, maybe to some of the people in this room, but you have to understand, Chinese consumers, a lot of them don't have personal computers, a lot of them can't afford PCs, but they all have phones. And Chinese consumers love esports. They're way into them. So there was an incredible opportunity for anybody that could put a MOBA onto a mobile device, but Unity wasn't going to make an esport. You weren't going to be able to pull that off. And even if you could, you weren't going to be able to put an esport on a phone and have it run at frame rate, not back then. But Tommy and Stefan could easily do it, right? They had the tech to do it. They had been working on it for years, and they had experience working in MOBAs. Back when they started writing their game engine, they were ignoring marketing data. They were ignoring the advice of their peers. But when this opportunity struck, they were the only ones capable of capitalizing on it. And Vainglory has done super well. They have a company with over 80 employees now. So, for the record, Slipgate Ironworks had brilliant programmers, and they cannot be the scapegoat. And for the record, I also don't want anyone to think that I blame Big World. I don't. I think Big World is more than capable of shipping an MMO, and I think they've proven it. You may not realize this, but while we weren't the only company using Big World, right? On the other side of the world, there was a totally different team that was using that was using the Big World technology, and they were making an MMO, and they were making it entirely in Python. And 1 year after we canceled our game, they shipped theirs. It did really well. It's called World of Tanks. It was stable. So the problem here wasn't really the engine. So if the tech leadership at Slipgate was brilliant and capable, then why didn't Slipgate succeed? Slipgate had far more money than Stefan and Tommy, and Slipgate had literally the same staff, right? Begging to do their jobs. And according to all the metrics and the marketing data at the time, Slipgate had a better business plan. I think there's something that we can take away from this, but I'll get back to it at the end because I promised EGX I'd tell a bunch of stories about studio closures, and the next one is Irrational Games. I worked at Irrational Games on a title called BioShock Infinite. We made the game of the year, and then less than 2 years later, the studio closed. We all lost our jobs. I'm under something called NDA. If you don't know what that means, basically it means you're probably not going to get a hot take for Twitter right now. I'm not going to tell you any juicy secrets, but I'll tell you what's not a secret. We worked hard on BioShock Infinite. It was in development for a long time. And it's not a secret that BioShock Infinite was quite successful. And that might seem really inevitable now, but back then that wasn't super clear. We didn't know for sure that we would break even. You have to keep in mind, this game was in development for a while, and it wasn't cheap to develop. And we shipped this game 6 years ago. Back then, the entire industry was saying it was impossible to make money on a single-player game. Back then, people were saying, if you made a single-player game and you didn't have any ongoing revenue, then a consumer would buy your game once and return it to GameStop. Everyone else will buy your game used. You'll never see any revenue after the first week. That was a real fear. We were afraid of that. We were afraid that no matter how hard we worked, even if we made the perfect game, it would make no money because GameStop exists. Now GameStop still kind of exists, but you know. Anyway, so it turned out that wasn't true. We did quite well. And these days, most consumers buy their games digitally. They don't sell their games back to a storefront. So that entire fear is different now, right? Now people are totally willing and unafraid when they make single-player games, right? No, I think people are afraid for totally different reasons now. And I can't tell you the numbers for how much BioShock Infinite made, because I don't know them anyways, and I don't want to get sued. But it's obvious that we did just fine. We were successful, not just financially, but we had the respect of our peers in the industry, and that felt really good. In fact, we were so successful, we started hiring. A year after we launched, we were working on DLC, and we needed an effects artist. So we asked around the studio, yo, does anybody know a good effects artist? We can poach anybody. We're Irrational Games. And Mike Snight perks up. Mike Snight, he was one of our best level builders. He's fantastic. I'm a huge fan of his. And he says he has a brother, Morgan Snight. His brother is passionate and talented and an effects artist. And his brother is stuck at a dead-end job working on a weird racing sports game that'll never ship. So we look at Morgan's work, and we're like, yeah, I'm into this. Let's poach Morgan. Mike calls his brother, and he asks him to interview at Irrational. And his brother says, nah, he's going to stay where he is. We were actually upset about this. We couldn't figure out why. Irrational was doing super well. We were on top of the world. We could have picked anybody in the industry, except for Morgan Snight, who was decided to stay at his struggling startup. They'd already launched the game once. It did terribly, and they were launching a sequel to a failed title. 6 months after that conversation happened, Irrational Games closed. We all lost our jobs. 6 months after that, a weird racing sports game launched. So what's the takeaway here? What can we learn from this? I have another story. This is John Abercrombie. He was the lead programmer at Irrational Games. He worked there for 15 years. He was a lifer. He built the gameplay programming team from scratch, and when Irrational closed, a small group of people was asked to stay and form a new studio with Ken Levine. For those who don't know, Ken Levine is a visionary designer. Everything he touches is gold. His new studio is making something that I assume is truly fantastic and amazing. And John Abercrombie was invited to be a part of that. He declined. He had built that team over 15 years, and he wanted to go down with the ship. He asked that management hire one of the programmers that worked for him instead, so that he could save at least one person's job. After that, John moved his family south, and he took a job as a gameplay programmer at Epic Games. This was 5 years ago. He was hired as a senior programmer to work on a struggling title that had no future. It was in beta, and it wasn't gaining any kind of an audience. It was a huge step down in his career. But in spite of that, he worked hard, and the game launched, and it did okay. At GDC 2 years ago, I asked him if he was happy at Epic, and he said yes. And I asked him if he was going to move to a different team at Epic. He said, nah, I'm going to be on the live team at Fortnite. why the hell would you stay on Fortnite, man? That game has no legs. I thought he was crazy. I was wrong. You don't need me to tell you that Fortnite was not a flop. So what is the point of all this? Is there a secret to surviving the games industry? I actually believe that there is. I think there is one secret, and I think it's going to sound obvious and corny. The secret is to work on a product you believe in. I'm not saying blind faith or passion will guarantee success. It won't. Failure is the default state. No matter what you do in this industry, you'll most likely fail. Your career will be turbulent no matter what you do. But if the people working on a game aren't excited about what they're making, then you will definitely fail. Over the years, I've met many developers, and some are calm and easy to collaborate with, and some are difficult and opinionated. But none of that really concerns me. In my experience, a game's in trouble when people are quietly unhappy. Trouble starts when developers hate what they're doing, but they can't bring it up. They don't feel like they can bring it up because they don't feel like it even matters. To me, that's the worst sign. If your programmers feel like the code they're writing can't be stable because it's in a language they don't believe in, or if they're stuck with a code base that they believe is unfixable anyways, then they're not going to try to fix it. It's not because they're bad programmers. It's because they don't believe it can be done. If your artists don't like the art style they're working in, if they think it's ugly and uninteresting, if they think it can't be impressive, then they won't be able to make something impressive. It's not that the artist is bad or that the art style is bad. It's just a bad match. And I know it sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but it's so common. If your developers don't feel like they have the time to do something right, they won't feel accountable if they do it wrong. If your developers don't believe the game they're making will ship, if they don't think anybody will see what they're making, then they won't make something worth seeing. I hear stories like this all the time in this industry. There's so many examples of it. And I'll say what I fear when I look at a studio isn't people who are loud or shy or smell bad. What I fear is people that are apathetic or hopeless. Games are made by people, and people do their best work when they believe in what they're doing. And I know that sounds obvious, but it's surprisingly easy to forget. So the secret to surviving this industry is to work on things you love and believe in, even if it doesn't make sense to your brother or your peers, even if it goes against marketing data and dogma. I honestly, truly believe your best work will be the work you passionately believe in. And I want to tell you what I'm passionate about. For the past few years, I've been working on a game at home. This is a solo project of mine. This is Kine. Oh God, play. That was going to be Kine, but the videos aren't playing. Damn it. It wouldn't be game development without some technical difficulties. How do I get that over there? Yeah.
Drag and drop it on your right screen. Oh, right there.
Drag it over here.
Is that the video?
This is a PowerPoint.
Have you got the video file out of PowerPoint?
I guess I could do that. Hold on. Well, this is a really good reveal, guys. Feeling good about this moment. No, I don't.
Is that playing now?
I feel like that moment really lost a lot of its punch there. Damn it. The next several slides were all videos. Kind is a narrative grid-based puzzle game. It's about 3 machines that dream of being musicians. I've been working on it for the past 2 years. Here, let me show you some stuff. Kind of ad hoc here, so this will be a bit weird. Is that gonna? No, it's gonna open over here. Eek. I don't even know what to say. I'm a little off here now. But this is a puzzle game I've been working on. It's about 3 musicians that dream of being 3 machines that dream of being musicians. I wanted to build a world for them. I wanted to tell their stories next. I think there's a lot of interesting things that they have to say. The most interesting thing to me about these characters is I wanted to tell a story, but using motion rather than words. I'm an animator. I'm kind of into interesting motion. Like, if all you have is grid-based rotation and the ability to push, can you show the daily grind? Can you show what it takes to do something over and over, to slowly master a task? Or if you have grid-based motion and the ability to push, what can you do with that? Can you show characters dancing with each other? Can they feel feelings? Can they fall in love? And could you tell a little love story? Or maybe even the opposite. If all you have is these mechanics, the ability to push and rotate around, can you show injury? Can you tell a story about loss? Can you show what it's like to kind of feel hopeless? This is what I'm working on now. This is what I'm passionate about. This is kind. Oops. And the last slide just says thank you. Here's what it looks like. We mostly did it. Yeah, Kind is part of the Left Field collection this year at EGX, so if you want to head down to the show floor and play it, I'd really appreciate any feedback you have. My name is Gwen. I'm on Twitch and I'm on Twitter. My handle is Dire Goldfish. And I think I'm here to take questions if anybody wants to ask anything.
Anyone?
Free to go.
Let me formulate a question. So how did you choose to leave a company and start your own, or are you just working this on the side?
When Irrational, this project?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing this at home in my free time.
Oh wow. So how does that conflict with your normal schedule?
I don't sleep as much as I used to. Stopped going to the gym. That's bad.
And is that not taking a toll on
Yes,
like?
physically, yeah, that would be the case. It is difficult. I did, a year ago, I dropped down to working part-time at the Molasses Flood, and I stream development of Kind on Mondays, and I work part-time at the Molasses Flood, and I work part-time on this now. I have for about a year now, just because it was impossible to make both games at the same time. Solo dev and having a full-time job was just too much. I did kind of hit a wall about a year ago.
Hey, I got my first job making games 16 years ago, and I've been laid off 3 times since then, so I could relate to a lot of the things you said. But I was thinking that it's quite a common thing to happen. And is there a reason for that? Or is there any solution to it, do you think?
Is there a solution to studios being laid off a lot? I think we're slowly seeing something. At the end of the day, games are very expensive. And if you look at different productions, I think a lot of people compare the film industry to the games industry. What they tend to do is they hire up for a project and then everybody leaves, but it's kind of baked in. Everybody knows that's going to happen. Whereas I think in the games industry, because the projects are slightly longer and software people are used to the idea of having like a stable salary and so forth, for a long time you'd see this thing where studios would promise you that you have a full-time job, everything is good, and then you'd go work there and the project would end and they would realize they can't keep 150 people for the early stages of the next project. And I know everybody has different solutions for this. Like some studios kind of try really hard to make sure, how do I put it, to kind of daisy chain their projects. So I actually think that's incredibly difficult. The most important people, the creative leads of a project, definitely need to be there at the very beginning and at the very end. And you kind of like need a lot of people in the middle. I personally believe that contracting and outsource houses are going to be a huge part of what helps alleviate this. In my experience, like in the building I work, there's a group of programmers, engine programmers that all work together. They're a company called Disbelief. And what they do is they drop in towards the end of projects and just give programming help, engine cleanup and stuff, and help you ship specifically Unreal games on different consoles and things like that. Also, there's like Effectsville is an effects house. When you reach a certain point in a project where you need effects, you can have 3 effects artists drop in from them and then leave, right? I tend to feel that that is a really smart thing. I think you were going to see a lot more of that in this industry. People who have, how do I put it, stable studios with a core team that leverage other stable studios that are contracting out to different places, like kind of as a group, rather than a lot of individual freelancers. You also do see a lot more freelancing these days than you used to, because in my experience, I mean, there's the tragedy of like something goes terribly wrong, a game gets canceled and a studio shuts down, but more commonly you see a game ships, it does okay-ish, and there's not enough revenue to keep the staff and everybody busy in between, like going from project 1 to project 2 to project 3. And that weird gap time, I think, is where you tend to see a lot of layoffs too. I don't really have a solution for the studio closes and everybody loses their job because the game didn't do well. There's no like, well, I don't know what to say about that, right? That's a harder problem to solve too. It's a turbulent industry.
Yeah, hi. I noticed you're using Unreal Engine. Is that right?
Am I what?
Are you using Unreal Engine?
Yes, Unreal.
I mean, I know there's like an unspoken war between Unity and Unreal, and no one wants to talk about it that much. They just pick a side. Is there a particular reason?
Oh, I will. I like
Yeah,
I like Unreal
I'm
Engine.
Unreal
Yeah.
as well. I'm Unreal as well.
Oh, fuck it.
There's no
I'm
Unity
in.
guys in here, is there?
No, I run an Unreal Dev grant for this game,
Great.
so fuck them.
Yeah,
like
great.
I'm
I love it. I love it.
epic all the way. Yeah.
So to follow on that story, is there a particular feature for your new game, especially within Unreal, that you really wanted to use that song that Unity didn't have? Is there a particular reason?
Well, I'm an opportunist, so I just kind of, like, if I see they're doing something cool, I kind of just try to glom onto it, right? They were doing a new thing with their audio engine that I've been playing around with that helps me sync up the music between tracks. So a huge part of this game is as you play through, they're kind of composing music, and I'm layering in tracks as you play through. But in order to, it was difficult before to get the different tracks to kind of sync together, like the different stems as you build up a song. Whereas now with their new audio engine, that's a lot easier to do. And I think I'd like to lean more into their audio tech. I think their audio team is doing some cool things right now.
This may sound like a fairly generic question, but what motivates you? What inspires you?
Hunger. Nah, I mean, it depends on the project. It depends on what I'm doing, right? I'll say, right when I started this, I was thinking about, in the very beginning, I think I was trying to come up with a way for a character to move through the world in an interesting way. Because like I'm an animator and I'm really, really fucking sick of making run cycles. Like really sick of it. And so most of my talks over the last several years have been like, here's a way to not make run cycles. And one of the things I wanted to do was have I was just interested in the idea of a character that would like roll around and kind of kick off of walls and things, that was constantly doing somersaults, because I thought that would be cool. But I couldn't actually do that because that would be really hard. So I made a cube instead. And then in the simplified motion where a cube was rolling around, I just kind of thought that actually looked cool. I thought it was cool if a cube could roll onto a limb and then extend it and stand on it. I thought that just looked cool. And I just kind of really followed that. Like I really liked that motion. Up until I think, that was how like the core gameplay stuff started, I think. And then I'd say like La La Land came out and I loved that movie. Like the color scheme of it, the story of it, everything about that, basically all of it. I loved that movie. It was incredibly inspirational. So for this game, I would say that was a huge inspiration. But I can tell you, like, each game or product or thing I work on, there's different inspirations, right? Like The Flame and the Flood, we were really into Beasts of the Southern Wild. It was a film that came out, and we were really into that. And we were really into the idea of a Americana, a journey down a river, Huckleberry Finn kind of thing, and that kind of vibe. So I think each project, each thing you do has its own kind of inspirations for that. that'll change based on where you are in your life or what you're seeing or experiencing or liking in that moment.
Any more questions? No? Okay. So yes, once again, so you can go find Gwen in Left Field Collection. You can go play the game right now, and I encourage you to do so. But thank you very much to Gwen.
Thank you.